Hi, Ellie and Mac fans. I'm Jessica, and today we are going to be making the Melissa Crescent Moon Bag. Now, this one right here is the medium-sized bag, and there's a small, a medium, and a large, and there's also options for different panels on it. So this is like view A, where it's just a solid panel, and I believe this is view B, where it has the two. There's also one that has 3 panels, but with vertical seams, and then one that has 3 but has diagonal seams. So today we're going to be making the bag in the smaller size with the diagonal seams, so that you have the instructions for both this type where it has the vertical seam and also the diagonal, which isn't much harder, but it's a little bit different. So I'm excited to show you that. So again, this one is the medium. It has the zipper. On the inside, there is a slip pocket and a zip pocket, and there's no binding, which I love. I don't know. Do you love no binding? This bag is birthed through either the interior pocket or the lining, and I'll show you both of those ways of how to do it. So let's get started. I'm so excited. If you decide to do the 3 color blocking pieces that are having diagonal seams, just remember that if you cut your fabric right side up, that you need to cut your interfacing wrong side up, because otherwise it won't adhere. So the sticky part needs to go here, right? The adhesive. And so if you cut it the other way around, it will be flip-flopped, and that won't work. So just keep in mind, if you're cutting this one, that you have to be a little bit more careful. Okay, so I just cut the lining, and this is something that you need to think about. If your lining has any stretch on the bias at all, you need to be really careful that you don't overhandle the fabric. If you sew clothes, you might think about this as looking a bit like a bodice. And if you had a bodice that was this shape in wovens, you would stay stitch it. So if you don't know what stay stitching is, it's just stitching within the seam allowance. You can start here at the top and go to the middle. Start here at the top and go to the middle. Use a stitch length of around 2.5 to 3. And like I said, just make sure it's within that seam allowance. This is just to prevent it from stretching out at all, because if it stretches out, it won't fit the rest of the bag. And you'll see as we start making this bag that if that part doesn't fit, it's going to be rather difficult to get it all together properly. For my lining, I'm using a light to medium weight woven interfacing. It's similar to SF 101, if you're familiar with that, with Pellon's SF 101. To get this on, of course, we have the adhesive side on the wrong side of the fabric. So kind of where those little dots are, and it's rough on the wrong side of the fabric. And I have my interfacing cut with the seam allowance out of it, so it's a little bit smaller all the way around than the piece. You can start here in the middle and press, and I like to count to about 10 and then start moving it to the side. And then I like to flip it over and do that again from the right side, or at least give it some heat. And then let that cool before handling. This is the interior slip pocket lining, and that's where the Welt zipper pocket should go. So if you choose not to interface this part, and I'm choosing not to, you at least need to interface right here across the Welt pocket. So I've just got a scrap that's a little bit wider than the Welt, and then a little bit taller, and maybe 1.25 inches. And then just go ahead and put that interfacing on, and that way you'll have that stability behind the pocket, and it won't rip through the pocket when you're using it, because that wouldn't be a good thing after you've made that whole beautiful bag. We're going to start with the interior slip pocket. I have only interfaced half of my slip pocket. If you'd like to interface the whole thing, you can. We're going to fold it wrong sides together, just as such, and then go press it so that the raw edges align here and it's nicely pressed along this fold. I have mine pressed, And now we will go ahead and top stitch about 1/8 of an inch across the straight edge of the pocket top and use a stitch length of about 3 to 3.5 across this. Okay, grab your bag body lining, the one that does not have a welt pocket marking on it, and we're going to grab that slip pocket that's been top stitched and then just align it onto the bag body lining. We're just going to match up all these edges around the bottom. Make sure that this part on top isn't like sitting crooked, so just make sure you really eyeball that well, or you can even fold it and make sure that you have that really nice. And then we're going to go ahead and pin or clip around the bottom. And after we've got that all pinned or clipped into place, we will just baste all the way around this bottom edge here. To divide up the slip pocket, we have two options. One is we can make a mark right here down the center and then stitch that into place, or we can divide it up into 3 different compartments. This is the small size bag, so it makes more sense to me to do just one down the middle. But if you're making one of the larger size bags, you can choose to split it 2 ways. That way it will be less likely to gape and you maybe can fit more things in each of the sections. If you're just doing the center one, it's quite easy. You can just fold it in half and then find that center. You can even iron it to get the crease. If you're wanting to do the 3 pockets, you'll need to measure it out, or you can use the view from the pattern of the exterior that has the 3 panels and divide it up that way. For this one, I'm just going to go ahead and fold it in the center. So I'm going to match up these areas here. Just like that. And with this fabric, I think I can just finger press and get a pretty good idea of where that is. Yep. And then I'll just lay my ruler on it. And this is a friction pen, so as soon as you apply any heat, the lines just disappear. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that in. You can use tailor's chalk or whatever type of marking tool you like that disappears. And then here at the top, if you're doing the 2 lines, it'll be the same thing. At the top, we want to make a little crow's foot. And to do that, we're just going to draw a line here and then the same on the other side, try to make them even. And that will be how we stitch it. So we're going to stitch like here and back stitch and here and back stitch, and then do this line separate all the way down, and you can back stitch at the bottom. That just gives you more security up here that this isn't going to rip out. Okay, here's the other interior body piece, the one that we did not put the slip pocket on. And you want to make sure that you've marked the welt pocket box. Here's the interior zipper pocket. And so we've also got the welt box marked on there. We want to put these right sides together. And the way I like to do it is to put a pin through one corner of the box. And then we're going to put that through the same corner of the box on the other piece. And that way we know that they are exactly aligned. And you can, you can pin it back into it, but sometimes I just like to leave the pins like that as I'm going so that I'm not like making it wonky as I go. So then we can do the next one. And if you want to do it, actually, I might do it from this side because I like to sew it from that back side. But whichever way you like to sew it, just make sure you have the marking on that side of the fabric. So again, through the welt pocket corner and then into the welt pocket, same corner on the other piece. And now we know that those two are aligned. We'll do the other side. And then if you want to double check and make sure that you've drawn those welt pockets the same length, you can kind of see if they match up well. It looks funny here because the pin heads are in the bottom of that and they're kind of thick on these pins, but that looks good to me. So I'll go ahead and stick that pin through another part of the fabric just to hold it nice and secure. And that way it's also not scratching my machine as I go to sew this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew 2 parallel lines. We're not going to sew all the way around the rectangle. You're just going to sew across the top line here and make sure you start and stop exactly where you drew, and then start here exactly where you started that one. You can backstitch and then go across, backstitch at the end as well. The idea is we want these parallel lines to be exactly the same length, as close as possible that we can. Okay, once you have those sewn, we are going to cut through the center of the pocket through both layers of fabric. You can use scissors. I like to use my rotary cutter on the very center with a ruler. So do it however you are comfortable. Don't go all the way to the edge if you're using the scissors or this. We're just going to go in the middle because we're going to cut that little triangle out on the sides too. And then you'll grab scissors and you want to cut out to the corners of these boxes right here. So make sure you leave yourself a nice corner and be careful not to cut beyond the stitches here. We're just going to cut right up into that rectangle without, close as we can, without snipping into the actual thread. So be careful and do that on both sides. Just like that. Now we are going to take this over to the iron and press each of these down to the wrong side on all 4 sides of the welt box. Okay, I pressed all of mine down. So now we're going to stuff this little lining through the body lining all the way. And then we're going to take this back over to the iron and press it so that it looks really nice. And see where that seam is, we're going to make sure that that's pressed all the way up so that we have enough room on here later to add the opposite side of the pocket part. So I'm going to take this over to my iron and give it a good press from this side and then flip it and do it again from this side so it's really nicely pressed. Okay, once you have that all nicely pressed, it will be ready for our zipper. So I'm going to set that to the side just for a moment, and you should have a zipper cut to the pattern length. If you're using zipper by the yard like I am, you'll need to add your pull. So I have this handy little zipper jig. If you need some guidance on how to use this, there is another video that will show you how to do it. But it's pretty simple when you have one of these zipper jigs to get this in here. And then you can decide if you want your pull to close to the right or to the left. Normally you want it to close to the right like that. So I'll go ahead and put that behind there. Now, if you'd like to make this a little bit easier and it not move around on you, you can use some double-sided sticky tape meant for sewing. So this one, you just go ahead and lay along the edge of the zipper. And do it for both sides. And I'm actually using Steam a seam. So to make this stick just a tiny bit better, I'm going to go press it with my iron. But if you have the kind that you don't have to heat up, then you can go ahead and just rip the top tape off now. And I will be right back. Okay, so then you rip that top tape off, but leave the bottom sticky stuff behind, like that. And then we'll just go ahead and lay it behind there, nicely centered on the pocket opening here. And I did go ahead and melt the end of my zippers before I came over here. So if you haven't done that and you've got zipper by the yard, you may want to go melt your zipper ends and come back just so that they don't fray on you later. But if you've already done that or you don't need to, you just press this in here so that this is nice and even all the way across. If you're not using double-sided tape or you think your tape isn't holding very well, you can put some pins through just to hold it in place. Sometimes what happens though when you put the pin through is it kind of bubbles up. So make sure before you get to that area that you take the pin out and you smooth it. And then what we're going to do is take this over to the sewing machine, and you can start on whichever top or bottom area you like. Don't start over here on the sides. And then you're just going to go ahead and be about 1/8 of an inch away from where that seam is. And you may need to use a zipper foot unless you have a real thin foot. Go all the way around and come back. If you want to back stitch here, you can, or if you like to pull your threads through the back so that you can't see that, you can also do that. I'm just going to back stitch on this area. It won't be too noticeable. Okay, once you've got all that stitched, we're going to flip it to the wrong side and grab the other interior zipper pocket piece. We're going to put that right sides together with the first one. And here you need to make a decision. So there are two ways that we can flip this bag through the lining. We can either flip it through this pocket, or we can leave a hole in the lining, the whole lining itself, and flip it through there. Now, if you flip it through the pocket, then the lining is going to look nicer when you look inside the bag. But if you chose not to add this pocket, you would have to do it through that lining. So it's up to you if you want to do it right here or if you want to do it, and I'll prompt you later about where to do it when we add the lining all together, when we assemble that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the gap here. I think it's nice and clean because you turn it through this pocket and then you really don't see where you sew it back up. So just leave a nice gap here about 5 inches wide so that you can stick your fingers in there and also turn the bag through this later. And we're going to sew around the rest of this pocket. So we can start here, go up, over, and down, back stitch on both sides. Now, if you decide to do it without turning it through here, then you can just go ahead and stitch the whole pocket all the way around. And make sure that you're not stitching it through this part just through these 2 layers right here. Okay, moving on to the strap connectors. You should have 4 of these cut out. These are pretty simple to start with. We're just going to put 2 of them right sides together and then pin or clip the sides. Do the same thing for the other pair. And then take them to the sewing machine, and you're going to use that 3/8 inch 1 centimeter seam allowance and sew down each of these sides. Next, you're going to trim both of these seam allowances in half. And then on the top side, which is the more narrow side, we are going to make a mark 3/8 inch, or that's 1 centimeter for you metric folks, from the top. So grab one of them, and I love these clear rulers. They're so nice because you can see like all the markings here. So on this one, I'm just going 1, 2, 3 to 3/8. If you have a different kind of ruler or a tape measure, that's okay too. And then I'm using tailor's chalk, and it's a little bit fat. So I pull back the ruler just a little bit to make sure that I'm actually marking at 3/8 and not over from 3/8. Just like that. Okay, set those aside for a moment, and we are going to move on to the webbing. So I have 2 1-inch wide D-rings and some webbing that is also 1 inch wide. And you're going to cut 2 lengths of this webbing that are each 3 inches long. Okay, next you're going to grab a lighter. I like these long ones that my hands are much farther away from the flame than the like little short ones. And if you're using webbing that is cotton and it's just like gonna blow up in flames, you can zigzag the ends of these, but you can see how this is really shiny. There is some synthetic fibers in this, probably polyester or nylon, so we can just easily melt the end, and this prevents it from fraying. You won't see these ends, so if you get a little bit fire happy and they turn a little crisp like mine, that's okay. If you keep it a little further away and be patient, that probably won't happen. Just make sure you get it really good so that it doesn't come apart on you later. Okay, then go ahead and grab those D-rings, and we're going to slide them on to the webbing. If you kind of like that other side better. So I'm going to put it this way. And then put a clip on the end of it to hold those short raw ends at the exact same spot. Okay, now we're going to measure 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters up from the raw end of this. webbing, and I'm just going to make a mark with that Friction pen. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'll know where to start. And we're going to stitch across the line that we are making right here. If you'd prefer to just use your, your guide on your sewing machine, as long as you have one that goes out to 1 inch, you can do that. But we're going to go ahead and stitch across both of these, back stitching while on both sides. Okay, grab those connectors, the strap connectors that we already sewed together, and the webbing with the D-rings. What we're going to do is on that wider side of the strap connectors, we're going to stick the raw end of the webbing up into the connector so that the D-ring is coming out that wider side like this. And we're going to press it up until it sticks a little bit beyond the top of the strap connector. That line that we drew and then stitched right here, we want it to align with the line that we drew right here. So there's a couple ways you can measure that. You can grab your ruler, and you're wanting this line right here at 1 inch to be in that spot, and then this one should come up to that same 1 inch area. Or if you'd like to measure just what's sticking out, that should be 5/8 inch. And then we will pin or clip that into place. And then we'll take this over to the sewing machine and stitch right across that line that we marked there. So when we stitch this, we're actually not going to start all the way at the edge of the fabric. We're going to start at our stitching line here and end at our stitching line here. So just in between the stitching lines. Okay, after you have those both stitched, we are going to just trim the corner right here. But be careful, we are not going to trim the webbing. We're only trimming the fabric. So we're just trimming this little section right here. And then we are going to flip it right side out. So you can kind of start pulling it to the right side and then use the D-ring to help you. If you didn't trim off enough in the corners, you'll know because this won't go up very well. But I'm going to grab a little chopstick. You can grab any blunt object and kind of press it into these corners to make them look nice. Okay, now grab your exterior bag body, and if you've cut a color blocked set, then you'll need to sew them together. If you've only done front view A and everything's solid, then you can skip this part and go to the next part. But if you need to do the color block assembly, then this is how we're going to do it. If you have just two pieces and they're vertical lines, it's really simple. You can just put them right sides together and sew down that seam. But with these diagonal ones, it's a little bit more complicated just because it looks, you can see like on these two pieces, it looks like this is longer. This one is longer than that one. And it kind of is, but it's really just that the seam allowance has to be that way. So what you can do is fold it in half and find the center point. And then do the same on this piece where we're going to connect that to. And then we can just match up those two center points. So we're going to put them right sides together, matching up those center points. And then you can pin or clip along the rest of the way. And that way you know that you have it perfectly aligned in the center of those pieces. And when you turn them right side out, it will all work out. See how that aligns perfectly there and perfectly there. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the sewing machine on this and sew all the way down that seam. If you're sewing one of the other views, then you will just do the same thing once or twice, depending on if you're doing the 2 panels or the 3 panels. And then we'll come back. Okay, once you have that sewn up, you can push this, just finger press it for now. And then if you're doing a 3rd piece, go ahead and put that on as well. So you can do the same thing with this one. Find the center of the side that you are going to attach to the other one. And the same on here. And then we're going to align those two, put them right sides together. And then pin or clip along the rest of this seam. And you should have it that it comes out just right. It looks like I have mine off just a little bit, so let's recenter that. This one's a little bit easier to see from the bottom. So that little triangle looks like it will stick out from the top. So let's check that. Yeah, that's looking nice. So I'll go ahead and go stitch that along the seam as well. Okay, I've got that stitched. Now I'm going to open it up and that's looking pretty good. If you're off by just a tiny bit at the bottom, it's okay as long as it's not outside of the seam allowance. I'm going to go press this with my iron. If you are using vinyl and you can't, you can roll it and just make sure it's really nice and open on both sides. And then if you'd like to top stitch it, you can. So on the wrong side, we can cut these seam allowances down to about half and then do some top stitching if you choose. So you can put them both up or put them both down, whichever way you like to do the top stitching. So currently I've got them kind of finger pressed up. And if that were the case, we want to always top stitch on the seam that we have this way. So we can go down and we can go down like this. Okay, after pressing it, I'm kind of liking the idea of just top stitching on this center panel. So I've got both of the seam allowances pressed toward the center, and I'm going to top stitch with a 3 to 3.5 millimeter stitch across right here, about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam, and the same here, but both on that center panel. But you know, I think any way that you want to top stitch this is going to look good. Okay, go ahead and grab all of your bag body pieces. And we are going to fold them each in half. And make sure that you're matching up here too. Like it's going to be a little, like you have to look at that whole seam. Don't look just only at this area right here, because you'll do that, but you also need to look at the top and make sure that that aligns. And once you've found the center, you can mark it however way you choose. I'm going to take just a tiny little snip at a diagonal, just like that. And then see, that will be right there. If you'd prefer to mark it with a pin, a clip, or you know, a marking pen or chalk or something like that, you can. So we're going to do that for all 4 of the pieces. You want to find the top and also the bottom. So when you have that nicely folded on the top, also fold it right down the center and make sure these outer edges are aligned well. You might need to like realign them. And then mark that bottom center as well, so that you have both the top and the bottom marked on all 4 pieces. Okay, now you need the main zipper, so cut that to the length from the pattern. If there is a zipper pull on it, then you're going to need to take it off. So go ahead and take that off. Make sure that the ends of your zipper are melted so that they don't fray. And before we get all the way apart, I'm going to go ahead and fold the zipper so we can find the center of the zipper. And go ahead and mark that how you'd like. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and use the pen and mark it on both sides of the tape. Then you're going to pull the zipper apart and grab one of your main exterior bag body pieces. And right at the center where we marked, we're going to line that with the center of the bag, right sides together. So flip your zipper over to the wrong side facing up so that you can put those right sides together and pin or clip that into place. And then you can add, a couple more pins or clips just on this straight area right here. Don't go too far out, just kind of like maybe right here where it's straight, like that. And then we're going to grab our scissors, and I'm going to flip this around so it's easier. We need to get the zipper tape to come around this curve, but do you see how it's like crumpling up right there? So what you can do is you're going to make little snips about 1/4 inch deep. Don't make them too deep. We don't want to go past the seam allowance. And then make them about every 1/2 inch, just on that area where I need to get it to curve around the bag. So make them just a tiny bit deeper, but be careful, don't go too far. And then you're going to come up to the end here. So if you want, you can pin or clip this top first and then make your way back to get these all eased in. Okay, and then we're going to do that same thing on the other side. It might feel like it doesn't fit, but the zipper will fit because you're matching up the seam allowance length and not the outer edge length of both the zipper and the bag. Okay, and once you have those all clipped on very nicely like that, we will do the same thing on the other exterior bag body piece. And then we will take them both to the sewing machine and baste at about 1/4 inch all the way around here. Okay, next we're going to add a lining to one of the exterior with the zipper sandwiched in between. Since I have view A with no color blocking on this one, I'm going to add the zippered one to that just because there's less bulk than if I were to add this one to the color blocking one. But it doesn't really matter which one you do. So we're going to lay those right sides together, and we're going to make sure that that zipper stays down like this. And then we will pin or clip this all along that zipper again. So these pieces are right sides together, and that zipper is sandwiched in between. You can also choose to do that center part right there and work your way out the same way we did the first time. You might have better results than trying to start on the edge. Okay, once you have that all pinned or clipped into place, we're going to go back to the sewing machine and sew this time with the 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around. And then we'll do the same thing with this exterior and this lining and sew them both. And just make sure that that zipper doesn't like flip up into the way. You want to make sure it's down that whole time. You might need to use a zipper foot for this part. Okay, once you have that all sewn, you can kind of peek and make sure everything looks good on this side. And then we're going to trim into these curved areas with our scissors, making little triangles. So you don't cut through the stitching line. You don't want to have your scissors like this, you know, just a sharp pair of scissors, and stop right before the stitching line and make little triangle, and then about a 1/2 inch away another, and just do this around all the curved areas on both of the exteriors to main to lining that you just sewed. Okay, once you've got those all trimmed in on both pieces, we're going to flip it to the right side. And then depending on your fabric, you're either going to go press this or you're going to roll it really well from both sides and get the main and lining pulled away from the zipper on both of these sides. And then you can choose to top stitch through all the layers. It'll keep that zipper from pulling backward, and it'll keep the lining down so it doesn't get caught in the zipper. So you'll get this all nicely pressed on both of them, and then top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper all the way around. Use a stitch length of 3 to 3.5 for this to make it look really nice. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and put that zipper pull onto the zipper. You can decide which way you'd like it to close. Generally, you want to close it to the right from the front, but you know, whatever you choose to do. If you're left-handed or right-handed, that might make a difference. So I want mine to close this way. So I'm going to start it from this side. You may have to do this a few times to make sure that the ends line up properly. And that actually looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to keep that, but we need to put it on just once more from the same direction. And that will seat the zipper pull right in the center and have all the rest of the zipper closed. So maybe, yep, this one needs to go in first for me. So, you know, if you have to do it a couple times, try not to get too frustrated. Sometimes it doesn't work out and I have to do it like 10 times, and that's okay. Okay, so I have that centered now on the zipper like this, and all the zipper teeth are closed together. Go ahead and open up so that you can get to the end right here, and we're going to baste on this side and on this side the zipper closed. If you're using a metal zipper, you'll need to hand baste that. Or go really slow and hand crank it through the machine. Okay, grab your gusset, both the main and lining, and we're going to fold them right sides together and mark the center on both sides of the gusset. So you can do that with a pin, a clip, scissors, or you know, you can mark it with a pen, however you choose. I'm going to grab scissors here just in case I lose that clip, and mark it with a little snip. And then do the same thing for the lining. Okay, so now you should have the centers of both the main and the lining marked. We're going to start with the main gusset, and so we can start on one side of the bag. It doesn't matter if you start on the front or the back. We're going to match up the center of the bag body with the center of the gusset. I'm going to put them right sides together. So if you hadn't marked the bottom center of all of these, you need to do that now. I already marked mine, so I'm going to go ahead and find that marking. And it's funny, from this side you can't see it, but from the back it's like right there. And go ahead and line those up and pin or clip that into place. And then we're just going to work our way around If you need to on this curved part, you can make some snips into the gusset. Just make the 1/4 inch snips the same as we did on the zipper, just around the part where it curves right here. It kind of depends on your fabric. This denim is a little bit more forgiving, so I don't need to. But if you have a real stiff fabric, then you can make those snips into there. Because at the top, we want this to come up to right about the same height as our side of our bag, see? And if it's not, then you may need to go back and do it again and make sure that that matches up really well. So now I'm going to do it on the other side. So I have this side here. Now let's do this over here on the other side. And remember that we are matching up the seam allowance and not the edge. So as we come around here, you can even pin or clip at about 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter so that you can make sure that you're actually matching up your seam allowance and not those raw edges, because that isn't what we're sewing. Okay, that looks pretty good. On both sides, they should come up and meet about at this. Now this one to me looks just a little bit longer, so I'm wondering if maybe I need to go back and ease that in just a little bit better. Pull it down just a bit and ease that in a little bit better so that they match up here at the top. So I'm going to re-clip. Yeah, and that's looking great. Okay, and once you have it clipped all the way around, we're going to go sew just these 2 layers, flip everything else out of the way. Just go sew all along here with that 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, and as we sew this, we're going to want to sew with this gusset area on top. That way, if we do need to make any more snips into the gusset to make that fit properly, we can. And make sure you keep the lining out of the way. We're only sewing the 2 exterior fabrics together. Okay, so after you sew that up, you can flip it right side out just to check and make sure everything looks good. I think that's looking so cute. I'm excited. So, but then go ahead and flip it back to the wrong side, because now we need to attach the opposite back body exterior to this part. So we're going to flip that over the zipper and then do the same thing. We're going to match it up first at the center bottom points here. And then if you need to make any snips into the gusset, which it looks like I might need to on this side just because I'm kind of pulling it a little bit more. So to make those little snips, we're just going to do it on the parts where we're going around the circle and just make like 1/4 inch snips every so often. And then we can match all that up. I'm going to put this here at the top, just so I know how much I need to ease the rest of that in. Okay, so I've got this side. Now we need to do the opposite side. Okay, once you have that all clipped into place, you're just going to go ahead and sew all the way around there. And again, it's just through the exterior bag body and gusset. The lining should be over on the other side. We're not touching that yet. And again, we do want to sew with the gusset on top in case we need to make any extra snips into it. So you just kind of stuff it into there. Okay, once you've got all that sewn up on the exterior, we're going to work on the lining. So just flip that over so that you can see both sides of the lining on this side. And of course, the main will be over there. And we're going to do the same thing with the gusset. So you can start on either side of the bag body lining. We're going to grab that gusset and find the center that we marked. See, mine's right here. And the center of the bag body, right sides together, pin or clip that center spot. And then the same thing, if you need to clip into the gusset around the curve, you can. And you want it to come up and meet right here in the same spot at the end. So if you need to ease that in a little bit, then you can ease it in a bit. Okay, once you have all the way clipped around the gusset to one of the bag body linings, we're going to sew just that to each other, go all the way around, and try to make sure that you end up at the same spot on both of these tops, and sew with the gusset on the top as you're sewing. So you want to start from this side and sew all the way around. Okay, so I got all that sewn up. This is where you need to think about if you want to, or if you already left a hole in the zipper. So in this bag, I did leave a hole. Do you see this? If you did not leave this hole, then you have to leave this next hole. If you did leave this hole, then you don't need to leave a hole. So it's one or the other. You either leave a hole in the interior pocket, or you leave a hole in this lining gusset right here. So either way, we're going to sew the gusset to the other side of the bag. But if you did not leave a gap before, then you want to leave yourself about a 5-inch gap right here. And I would leave it right at the bottom. So clip it all into place first, starting with that center with the gusset and this side of the lining, just the same way we've been doing. And then if you're leaving the gap, go ahead and mark that for yourself. I like to put 2 clips on top of each other, but if you use pins, you can put 2 pins on top of each other. It's just that sometimes you're sewing along and you're like, oh, I'm going to remember that. And then if you don't remind yourself, you forget. I don't know, at least I forget. Let me know in the comments, like, do you forget to leave the gap? Because I have done that so many times and had to pick my stitches. Okay, once you have everything clipped into place, again, if you're leaving your gap, you'll leave it right here at the bottom, and you can mark that for yourself. And either way, though, you'll start and you'll just go ahead and sew around the gusset, gap or no gap, and back to the top. And make sure that you leave the gusset on the top when you're sewing this seam. Okay, once you have that all sewn up, we're going to flip that to one of the sides. It doesn't matter which one, but we just need access to this little gap right here between the main exterior gusset and the zipper. And you're going to grab one of your strap connectors that you already made and drop it down into that little gap. This other piece of the lining will just be sitting over here. So I'm going to make sure it fits in there. And depending on if you had like your seam allowance and you're cutting exactly perfect, you might find that like it needs to be pulled up or down just a little bit, but you're trying to make it flush with the raw edges of the fabric here. Okay, so I'm going to pull mine up just a tiny bit because this denim is quite thick and it's causing it to not fit in there quite as well, but it's not up a lot, you know, it's maybe 1/8 of an inch. And then you're going to pin or clip that into place. And then do the same on the other side. And if you did up a little bit on that side, we got to go up a little bit on this side just to make them even. If you can get it all the way down in there with those raw edges flush on the top, great. But if it's like bending inside, then we can't do that. We need to pull it up just a tiny bit. Okay, at this point, if you'd like, you can baste this into place and then turn it right side out and check it. Or if you just want to go for it, you can just go for it. Hey, before we sew this, it's best if we make a mark right at our seam allowance so that we can make sure that we sew it exactly straight. So I'm going to measure down 3/8 of an inch, or I'm going to move my clips just to make this easier. Or you could do, 1 centimeter if you're doing metric, right from that raw edge of the gusset. And you're not going to sew past the stitching line. So just sew from here, start right there and back stitch across the line over to here and stop. So don't go into this area or this area when you sew. And lastly, you need to have this lining part here just pulled flat against the main fabric there, and then you can just include it in your pinner clip just like that. So the strap's still going to be, obviously in this exterior part, and then we're just clipping the lining on the back just to keep it in that seam. And the same on the other side. So kind of fiddle with it and get those raw edges pulled out and clipped into that. As you can see with mine, this is going to be pretty thick with all these layers of denim. And in the instructions, it actually tells you at the very beginning, like, to be aware that this is that step right here that has the thickest part. So if this ends up being too thick for your machine, you may have to go and do a different strap connector that's not quite so thick. I have a heavy duty machine, so I'm not worried about it. But if your machine can't handle this, then you need to reassess this seam right here, because this is going to be the thickest one of them all. Okay, once you have that sewn, we need to trim these corners so that when we turn it out, right, you can not have a bunch of bulk there. So we're going to look at where these seams come together right here and cut right on the outside of that. And you can just kind of cut. I know it's kind of scary. Just cut at a 45-degree angle there. And same on this side. Just don't cut into those stitches. And then we want to reduce the bulk just a little bit more. So we're going to trim right here at the top, about half of that gone. And then we're going to trim a little bit more right here on the side and here on this side. And hopefully that will be enough trimming. If you turn it right side out and it's kind of bulky, you can come back and trim a bit more. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, and here's our moment of truth. We're going to find the gap that you left, either in that interior zip pocket or in the gusset lining, and stick your hand in there and very carefully pull that right side out. You can just pull the the strap connectors for now and check how they look if you'd like. And if you don't like it, then you'll have to go back and redo some stuff. If you just basted it, you can check this beforehand before trimming. And that's probably better. That way you're making sure that they both look good. I think that looks good. And then on this side, I might actually stuff that back through so I have more room in this gap to check the other side. Just don't pull too hard. You don't want to pull any stitches out. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. It could have been maybe a tiny bit straighter, but I'm happy enough with that. So if you're happy with how it looks, you can go ahead and turn the whole thing right side out through that gap. And this, depending on how stiff your fabric is and how big the bag you made is and how stiff your interfacing is, it could be hard. I've had them where I'm like trying to birth a bag for like 5 minutes and my hands hurt at the end of it. This one's not too bad, but it can be hard. So don't feel discouraged. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So to make the bag look nice, I'm going to stick my hand back through that gap and press out all the seams around the gusset. Okay, and then from here, depending on what fabric you have, if you're having issues with these seams like not laying flat, there's a couple things you can do. One is that you can grab some clips, you can push that seam flat like this and put a clip on it and go all the way around your seam. And then you can, if you're using like vinyl or even if you regular fabric, you can hit it with some heat. Like you can use a hair dryer, that works pretty well. Or you might be able to do just some really light like steam from your iron. Just be careful, you know, whatever fabric you have. But you're trying to just get these seams to kind of sit flat. Oh, I think that's looking really good. So I've got mine kind of pressed it all like this and hit it a little bit with the iron with some steam and squeezed that closed. Okay, on the interior, you're gonna need to close up the gap that you left. So if you left it in the interior pocket like I did, you can just pull that gap out and press it closed. If you use that 3/8 inch amount and you just fold the fabric to the wrong side and press it, and then it will line up really well. And you can choose to either hand sew this or machine sew this. If it's in the pocket, you're never going to see it. So I would say go for the machine. And but if it's in the lining, that's up to you. So if it's in this gusset lining right here, you'll just have that same type of gap. It'll just be in this spot. And you do the exact same thing with the fabric. You can press it and then machine or hand sew it. If you hand sew it, use a ladder stitch. If you don't know how to do a ladder stitch, that's a pretty common stitch and you can look that up. Some people will use what they call a slip stitch, which I think might be the same thing, but I always call it a ladder stitch. Okay, the first thing you'll need for the strap is webbing. This is 1-inch webbing, and you can cut it to 36 inches long if you want it to be just a side carrying strap. I like to carry mine crossbody, and I'm not very tall or very big, so I just cut mine 2 inches longer so that I can carry it crossbody or on the shoulder, however I feel like. So on the ends of this webbing, we need to prevent it from fraying. So you can either do a zigzag stitch or you can use a lighter. And this time I'm going to be a little bit more careful not to make big scorch marks on that. and then when you've got both of the ends, like somehow prevent it from fraying by either melting or zigzag stitching. And actually, I think I need to get this side just a little better. I'm already seeing it fray. This stuff, depending on what type it is, it likes to really fray. And then we are going to go ahead and slide one of your swivel clasps onto the webbing. This swivel clasp, if you can see it, is really lightweight and cheap. If you're using a heavier bag, like a medium size, or you plan on carrying a lot of stuff, don't use these cheap little ones. It's just, this is what I had, and I know it's a light bag, so it'll work. So we can grab a tape measure or seam gauge, and at 2.5 inches, that's how much we want the tail past the swivel clip to hang out. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure. Add a clip on this side just to hold it in place. And then we're going to fold this short end of the webbing underneath by 1 inch. So just do 1 inch, so about right there, and we're going to fold it underneath. And then clip that into place. You don't want to use pins on this because it'll just eat it up. So make sure you're using clips. Okay, and now on that end where we tucked it in, we are going to sew a box with an X. So you're going to go, you can start right here on this folded end and go up and over, go up about 1 inch this way, and then over and back. And when you get to the start of your box again, you're going to go diagonally up to this corner. And then you can go across the same line again and go diagonally down to that corner and backstitch. And that will be your whole box with the X through it. And we'll sew it here too. Okay, so we're gonna start again. Actually, I'm gonna just clip it up a little higher. We're gonna start here at this folded edge and about 1/8 of an inch from that edge. And I'm going to put my stitch length between 2 and 3. And we're going to go and backstitch and then go across. And then we're going to turn. Make sure this stays out of the way. And we'll go up to just before, it's going to be about the same length as that. And you could measure this out, but can also eyeball it, and then turn, and turn, and if I want to get like one more stitch in, but I know if I go one more stitch at this length, it's going to put me over the end. So I'm going to reduce my stitch length to, I've got it at like 1.8. You can go one more stitch, or you can hand crank it. Boom. And then we're going to turn and go diagonally. So you can turn it so that you aim for this corner here. Put my stitch length back up to normal and go across to there. And then we're going to turn it to where we're coming back this way, across that same line that you already stitched. And then go across diagonally the opposite way. So we went this way already. Now we're going to go this way to the other corner. And backstitch. And there we have our box with the X. Okay, so with that folded seam still facing upward, sort of like the ugly side toward us like that, we're going to grab the end of the webbing and the tri-glide. Now there's kind of a front and a back of this tri-glide, and I think there are on most of them. So like this is the top, that's the underside. And then you have like the top hole and the bottom hole, right? We're gonna go through the bottom hole on the underside. And then we're gonna go to the top hole over the bar and thread that through. Just like this. So now from the underside, you should see that threaded, you know, kind of like this under the loop. And again, we have that edge here, and that's all straight. Okay. And then we're gonna grab the raw edge of the webbing again, and we're going to thread the other swivel clasp onto it. So make sure that the swivel clasp is pointed down like this. And we're going to thread that on. And then on the tri-glide, pull out some of the webbing from the right side of it so that you have a gap. And we're going to go underneath the opposite side. So the side that had the first swivel clasp, we're going to go down that way. And then we're going to come back up through like underneath the bar and back up, just like this. Okay. I know it can be kind of tricky. If you have any problems with this, you can look at the instructions too and follow along with them. They're pretty clear and you can go as slow as you need. So again, I have my first swivel clasp that we sewed the box on, and then that leads to the tri-glide, and then the other swivel clasp is here faced out. If your swivel clasp was in that hole right there, then you've got to take it off and do it again. It needs to point out because that's where we're going to connect it onto the bag. And then we went back through the tri-glide, and the two that we went back through, so you have the tail and the part that you just barely like threaded it from, is what we're going to connect together. So in order to do that, we're going to pull that raw end 2 inches beyond the tri-glide. That's about right. And then we're going to clip the raw end of the webbing to the part of the webbing that we just looped around the center of the tri-glide, and sew that with a box stitch. So we're going to take this to the sewing machine right here, and we're going to sew that same box stitch. So start here, go up, over, and back, making that square, and then diagonal, across again, diagonal, and back stitch. Okay, once you have that sewn, your strap is all finished. So if you need to adjust it, you should be able to pull this so that it gets shorter, and pull that so that the whole strap gets longer, like that. And then we can just attach it onto our purse. I love how my Melissa Crescent Moon bag turned out. How did yours turn out? Please let me know in the comments how yours turned out, or if you have any questions along the way, we'd be happy to answer. This is just such an adorable bag in both the small and the medium size. Here are the two side by side, so you can kind of see the difference. This one could definitely still hold my big phone. This one's gonna hold a little bit more, right? So anyway, if you have made the bag, we'd love to see it. You can hop over to Instagram and tag us, or Facebook, or we do have a big Facebook group. There's like 90,000 people in that group. So go share your bag there. It's really fun to hear what people say. Such a like uplifting group. And then if you don't love Facebook or Instagram, you can also go on the Ellie and Mac website to the sewing community group and post in there. So anyway, I love how this can go both crossbody like I was just wearing it, or you can shorten up the strap. And of course I did make my strap 2 inches longer, so think about that. And wear it just on the side like this, just kind of fast put it on and not putting it on over your head. So however you like to wear it. I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments, and we'll see you next time.